man treats you like a treasure when he's unsure of himself, and like an afterthought the moment you show him you're not blind. There it is, the first sting. The one you pretend doesn't bother you, even though it does. You've seen men give their best to women who barely tolerate them, while giving their worst to the women who actually care. And here's the part you don't want to admit. You've wondered, quietly, ashamedly, whether being softer, easier, less demanding, would have kept him around. You don't say it out loud, but the question sits in your chest like a stone. Why do men seem to feel safer with women who don't challenge them? Why do they open up to the woman they don't respect, but shut down with the woman they actually admire? This is the point where most people drift into cliches about emotional immaturity or childhood trauma. I have no patience for that. There's a far more brutal explanation, one you've probably sensed, but never articulated. Here's what most people don't realize. A man's need for emotional safety has nothing to do with love, and everything to do with avoiding self-exposure. He doesn't retreat from you because you're warm. He retreats because your standards pull him out of the shadows he's grown comfortable living in. And the woman he doesn't respect? She demands nothing. She questions nothing. She threatens nothing. She becomes the perfect hideout, a place where he never has to confront the parts of himself he's terrified you'll notice. Pay attention to this part, because this is where things shift. Most women think they're being rejected for being too much, too smart, too aware, too discerning, too emotionally precise. You're not being rejected for being too much. You're being rejected because the version of him you awaken has nowhere to hide. Men feel safest where they feel least seen. Now, let me interrupt you before you drift into self-blame. This isn't your fault. This is a psychological instinct so primitive and embarrassing that most men would rather chew glass than admit it. Here's the research point. Since your rational mind needs something to hold on to, a study published in the journal Personality and Social Psychology Review found that individuals often gravitate toward relationships where their existing self-image is least threatened, even if that relationship is low quality. In other words, people choose familiarity over growth, even when familiarity insults them. If you've ever watched a man run back to a woman who offers him nothing but ego anesthesia, now you understand why. He wants the version of himself that requires no evolution. Let me give you a scene. Fictional, but painfully recognizable. A man meets two women. One sees him clearly. She notices the sharpness beneath the surface. She asks real questions. She expects follow-through. She offers him the kind of connection that exposes whether he's a man or a costume. The second woman sees nothing, or rather, she pretends not to. She gives him praise he didn't earn. She asks for little. She tolerates everything. She welcomes him without requiring him to show up as anything specific at all. Guess which one he feels safer with? It's not an intellectual choice. It's a survival instinct. Most men run toward the woman who requires the least internal renovation. This is the mistake most women don't realize they're making. You assume that offering emotional depth makes you valuable. But depth doesn't make you valuable. It makes you threatening. It makes you impossible to hide in. It forces him into psychological daylight, and some men prefer the basement. Now I know what you're thinking. So what am I supposed to do? Be less intelligent? Shrink? Dim myself? Absolutely not. The moment you dim yourself to keep someone, you have already lost them. Not because they leave, but because your self-respect does. Let me interrupt with the engagement note you wanted. If you're getting something from this, hit subscribe. It tells the algorithm to stop feeding you people who lie to you for views. Let's get back to the truth. There's a specific kind of woman men feel emotionally safe with. But not because she's comforting. It's because she requires nothing from them that could expose their inadequacy. Here's the part that changes everything. A man's fear isn't that you'll see his darkness. He knows you'll see that eventually. His real fear is that you'll see his mediocrity. Darkness can be romanticized. Mediocrity cannot. This is where the story gets even more interesting. Because some men feel most attached to the women they respect the least. Not because they want those women, but because those women give them permission to remain underdeveloped. The woman who doesn't challenge him becomes a sanctuary for the weaker parts of him, the parts he tries to hide behind ambition, confidence, or charm. She is not a partner. She is an emotional decoy. And here's the cruel twist. He will often treat this woman with more softness, more vulnerability, more emotional transparency than he ever offered the woman who actually challenged him. Don't misread that softness. It's not love. It's relief. You think he opened up because she mattered. He opened up because she was easy. Let me give you another pattern interrupt. Because you need this next truth to land cleanly. Men don't always feel safe where they feel valued. They feel safe where they feel unexposed. And the woman who challenges him? She exposes him with terrifying efficiency. She notices inconsistencies. She questions his stories. She spots the weak seams in his logic. She sees the immature parts of his emotional architecture. She doesn't let him hide behind potential. She sees the version of him he hasn't built yet, and that is unbearable. This is the moment where men start retreating, slowly at first, then suddenly. You think he lost interest. He didn't. He lost his disguise. Let me give you something sharper. A man respects the woman who challenges him, but he feels safer with the woman who doesn't. Respect and safety do not live in the same house. And the gap between them is where most women lose their minds, trying to interpret mixed signals. Now comes the part most creators would soften. I won't. A man will often test how little he can give. Not because he's malicious, but because comfort is the strongest drug known to human psychology. He will always return to the emotional environment where he feels least accountable. And you, if you're the woman with standards, are not his comfort. You are his reckoning. Let me illustrate this with one more example. You ask him a question that requires honesty. He hesitates, not because he doesn't know the answer, but because he knows the answer will rearrange his relationship with you. With the woman he doesn't respect, he gives any answer. It barely matters. She won't push. She won't peel back the layers to see whether he's lying or simply confused. She accepts whatever he offers and calls it communication. With you, he feels the weight of your discernment. You don't accept emotional loose change. You require currency backed by reality. And that terrifies him. This is where things shift again. The women men feel safest with are not always the women they want. They are the women who will never demand the version of him he is not ready to confront. But here's the irony that should comfort you. A man does not grow with the woman he doesn't respect. He decays with her. His ambition weakens. His discipline softens. His identity dissolves into something shapeless and passive. He becomes emotionally domesticated by ease, not strengthened by challenge. The woman he doesn't respect becomes the graveyard of his potential. You are not losing to her. He is. Here's the pattern I promised you, the one most people never see. even as it plays out in their own lives. A man attaches himself to the woman he doesn't respect because she reinforces the identity he already believes in. He may fantasize about becoming a stronger, deeper, more capable version of himself, but fantasies require no action. She requires no action. And so he sinks. But the woman who challenges him? She represents the identity he isn't sure he can rise to. Not yet. Maybe not ever. He feels exposed around her in a way he can't articulate. He feels observed, not judged, but seen. And for a man who hasn't made peace with himself, being seen feels like a threat. This is where the psychological trap tightens. Because while he decays with the woman he doesn't respect, there's a part of him that resents her for letting him decay. His ego may feel safe with her, but his potential suffocates. That's why he's restless. That's why he's inconsistent. That's why he becomes a ghost wearing the shape of a boyfriend. And here's the irony. Even though he feels safer with the woman who doesn't challenge him, he eventually begins to associate her with the version of himself he secretly hates. So he stays just long enough to avoid himself, and leaves the moment the self-disgust becomes too loud. And you, if you're the woman with standards, get hit with the illusion that you somehow scared him off. You didn't scare him off. You reminded him of the man he keeps promising himself he'll become tomorrow. Let me hit you with another truth most people don't want to hear. Men will often abandon the woman who challenges them. But they never forget her. Not because of nostalgia, but because she remains the mirror he still hasn't stepped up to face. And you can feel this, can't you? You can feel when a man is treating you like the future he's not ready for. His desire is real, but his preparedness is not. His interest is real, but his infrastructure is not. And the woman he runs to afterward? She becomes the emotional basement he retreats to when he realizes he can't survive upstairs. Pay attention to this part. This is where the emotional math finally clicks into place. Men don't fall for the woman who makes them comfortable. They settle with her. But they fall for the woman who forces them to confront themselves, even if they run from her. Let me break the tension for a moment with something slightly darker. You're not crazy for being confused. You're dealing with a creature who will text a woman he doesn't respect paragraphs of emotional poetry, while giving the woman who could have raised him a kingdom one-word replies like he's on strike. But it's not hypocrisy. It's avoidance. The women men choose are not always the women who inspire them. Sometimes they choose the women who demand the least bravery. Now let me give you a scenario you've probably lived. He's dating someone new. You look at her page. You squint. You tilt your head. You zoom in. You whisper to no one, "Really?" And then you feel insulted. Not because she's beneath you, but because he chose someone who lets him live at a lower emotional altitude. That's when the truth hits you. He didn't leave you for an upgrade. He left you for an escape. This is the point where most women make the fatal mistake. They start competing with the woman he doesn't respect, without realizing they're competing for a man who is currently beneath their standards. Let me give you a line that may sting, but it will free you. Never compete for the man you had to shrink to keep. Because if a man chooses emotional safety over emotional growth, he will always drift toward the environment where he can remain unchallenged. And here's where things shift again. The moment you stop trying to impress him with softness and start honoring your own clarity, the dynamic flips. Because men can tolerate losing the woman they don't respect, but they are haunted by losing the woman who held them accountable without cruelty. The challenge you offered wasn't an attack. It was an invitation. He simply wasn't ready to RSVP. Now let me give you the final twist, in this psychological knot. He will eventually outgrow the woman he doesn't respect, not because he matures, but because mediocrity becomes suffocating when the delusion fades. And guess who he thinks of when he realizes what he traded away? Not the woman who never required anything, but the woman who forced him to confront himself. He remembers the one who didn't let him hide, the one who didn't worship his potential while ignoring his reality, the one who could tell when he was lying to himself, even when he couldn't. He thinks of you, not with entitlement, but with regret disguised as nostalgia. Let me interrupt this with a dry truth. Men don't regret losing the woman who made their life easier. They regret losing the woman who made their life meaningful. But meaning requires effort. Support requires vulnerability. Growth requires discomfort. And before a man can offer those things, he must first be willing to become someone he's not ashamed to be seen by. Until then, he'll continue to feel safer with the woman who never challenges him, the one who keeps the lights dim so he never has to see the room he's hiding in. Let me leave you with something sharper than hope: clarity. A man choosing a woman he doesn't respect is not a reflection of your inadequacy. It's a reflection of his capacity. You didn't lose him. He disqualified himself. And if he ever returns, pay attention to who he has become, not who he says he wants to be, not who he pretends to be, but who he is when the performance ends. If he walks back into your life unchanged, he's not coming back for you. He's coming back for the comfort you refuse to give him. And now, before we close this out, let me remind you, if this hit you in the chest, subscribe. You don't want to miss what's coming next. My coaching is on sale right now because the new year has people waking up to patterns they can't survive anymore. You can find everything pinned in the comments. The landing page is finished. It's in the description. Read the free PDF. Watch the video. Subscribe to the newsletter. And pre-order the feminine game while you're there. Before you click away, drop a comment. Have you ever watched a man choose emotional safety over emotional growth? And what did it reveal to you? I'll read everyone.